Hey, hi everyone. My name is Richard van Hooydonk. I'm a trend watcher and a futurist, and I want to welcome you to the third Trimble podcast about AI, new technology, and the future of transportation. So today we have a really special guest. You already see him. I'm really looking forward to speak with him. He's John McIntyre. He's the Chief Product and Technology Officer for Transport and Logistics at Trimble. Jonna, welcome, man.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah,
Appreciate you having me on.
yeah, great. I mean, a lot of viewers will now look at you and say, "What is this guy doing?" I mean, you're walking, right? So tell me all
Yeah,
about
yeah.
it.
I'm not just shifting from left to right pointlessly. I'm doing it to walk on my treadmill that I've got in my office.
Yeah, and you feel better because of this. I think it's a really interesting thing to talk to you while you're walking. Actually, it's quite natural, you know.
Yeah.
All right, it's great to have you in the podcast today. You know, as a trend watcher, I inspire a lot of people about the future of technology, but you make it happen. You know, that's the difference between me and you. I talk about it, and you make it happen. So I really would like to get to know you a little bit better
Mhm,
because you know you guys are doing great things at Trimble at the moment. And
mhm.
how did your career start? Where did it start? The whole concept about technology and AI. Go ahead.
Yeah, specific to my career, is that what you were asking?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my career really starts in supply chain after my master's degree. I had a focus in supply chain. I started by helping run a supply chain for a large U.S. retailer. Then I went to help start new business units in Asia for Manhattan Associates, and then create the in-house IT solutions for Panalpina, which at the time I think was fourth largest logistics provider in the world.
Mhm.
Then I had a startup. I identified early the importance of cloud computing for transport planning and optimization. So I made an early startup there. It was eventually acquired by GT Nexus. It was part of their leadership. Then GT Nexus was acquired by Infor. Then I went and started a new company that was applied AI to transport procurement and negotiations.
Mhm.
That was eventually acquired by Transporian. And then I was part of Transporian leadership and was acquired by Trimble. So a lot of starting businesses, starting business units, acquisitions,
Yeah.
and supply chain technology.
It sounds like a real interesting journey you did the last
Been
years.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So CPTO, which is a great title, you know,
Mhm.
and a lot of um, how how um, how does your day look like? In the morning you start. So maybe you can give us kind of an impression how your day
Yeah.
looks like. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a large team, but most of them are in Europe. So about 1,300 people, and um, maybe 700 or so are in Europe. The rest are in India, some in Asia, or the North America, Canada, and the U.S. And
So
so my days start pretty early. They
yeah.
typically I'm up and starting to look through revisions to the day's schedule or kind of last minute notes at about 6 a.m. From 6:30, sometimes 7, I'm starting on calls. I'm a big believer in a high degree of preparation for calls. So there's always pre-reads, but so I would have been prepared for the calls. They go from about 6:30 to 11:30. Um, then from 11:30 to maybe 2 o'clock, there's typically more calls that are with the North American teams. And then from about 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock is focus time where I read for the next day's meetings, comment into pre-reads, or if I'm lucky, I do a bit of focus work on my own, do my own writing. And then the day begins again the next day.
And how do you find time for yourself? Like, I mean, thinking about ideas and solutions, because you know these conversations are wonderful with people, but in the end, you got to think. So how do you prepare yourself for thinking and having the pace and also
Yeah.
the ease to think about things? Go ahead.
Yeah, people typically don't like this answer, but I'm gonna give the truthful one, which is you just sacrifice your personal time. That's how I do it anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
There's there's a great great. There's a decent science fiction movie called Gattaca. At one point, these two brothers are doing a swimming contest, and the one who is supposed to be the weaker one keeps winning, and when asked how he does it, he just says, well, I just don't keep any energy for swimming back. Basically, we're swimming and I'm swimming until I die and you swim until you get tired. And that's why I can win.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's how I treat my work life. If I'm honest, I give it 100%. And that means that other things don't get 100%, but
Yeah,
that's
but
why I'm able to do it.
private business life management is also quite important, but you're doing that right now. You're working on your personal health while you're working, which is
Yeah, true.
all
True.
right. Thanks for that. Technology is changing organizations and also their business models. We all know that. So leaders must lead their companies in a different way. Leading the future is different than leading today. So they actually need to navigate uncertainty and explore the unknown. Managing uncertainty is quite important right now for a lot of companies. How do you see this as a leader?
Yeah, I think there's this explore versus exploit trade-off that is always present in business, and so you explore think about, by analogy, if you think about when you go to a new city, you've never been to Rome before, you go to Rome and you go out to eat and you're like, well, this is going to be the best restaurant I've ever been to in Rome because it's the only one. And then the next night, you have to decide, do I go back to that restaurant or do I explore? And you got a 50% chance, let's say, that because it's 1 out of 2, right? You have a 50% chance that the next restaurant will be better than the first one. And in an environment where you haven't explored very much, for example, right now as regards to the changes associated with the introduction of AI, we haven't, as a society, we haven't explored very much. So it's kind of like our first night in Rome.
Yeah.
And exploration probably pays out. In other places where we've explored, for years or more, then you kind of go, it's a bit like why in your hometown, you tend to go back to the same restaurants over and over because you've explored enough. Maybe you've tried 100 restaurants, and the idea that the 101st restaurant is going to beat all the other ones is kind of a stretch.
Yeah.
So you exploit what you've already learned, and I find that this thinking in this way gives me a good rule of thumb of where to invest my resources in exploring versus exploiting.
Really interesting. When I see these bigger transformations usually take between 5 and 8 years. And technology changes every 6 months. So, every half year we are behind. And that's something I think about a lot. And I see a lot of shareholders expect, a certain amount of growth and also, reporting and aligning with the shareholders' expectations. But I do think that does not align with managing uncertainty. How do you see that?
Yeah, I think that at scale businesses, so it's relatively easy for subscale business like startups, for example, to have nonlinear growth that comes from some pivot that you make, some change or some injection of something to your business. But scale businesses, that's really hard. I mean, especially when we talk about we work in enterprise software. If you think about enterprise software, these contracts are just the nature of these contracts is it takes a long time to sell them. Then when you sell them, they typically are multi-year in nature. So to see nonlinear growth is pretty hard. Instead, what you look for are the leading indicators of those. Like I think that's why people try to zoom in on things like, well, at least for me, I try to zoom in on things like, well, how much revenue do we have from things that were launched in the last 6 months? Or what is the win rate differential between the new products and the old products? Or what is the deal cycle times difference between these? And that gives me, I can trust in the organizational aptitude and capabilities to take something that works and make it work at scale, but the time horizon is longer for that. So I first want to look at, does it work at all at any, a tiny scale? And then I trust on like the organizational muscle to take it out.
And then you scale,
large
right?
scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also see that, a lot of people in companies, they actually looking for a predictable organization, with some excitement, but not too much.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, you guys are a technology company. I know quite some people of your company, so a lot of people
Hmm.
love a lot of excitement, but not all the
Yep.
companies have that DNA. So how do
Yeah.
you bring constant excitement and uncertainty as a pleasure instead of a pain?
Yeah. This is something I don't have a perfect formula for. As you said, there's a there's a distribution of kind of mindset when it comes to change. Some people rush to it. They in fact kind of want more change than is actually on offer from the environment. In some ways, they're restless, and inquisitive and curious. And then there are others who are more anxious about change. They want to master an environment and for it to be expectable, to behave in expectable ways and predictable.
Yeah.
And I don't really know a way to change those behaviors, or those internal worldviews. What I focus on instead is either editing the team to get the composition that I'm looking for. Neither one is sort of good in and of itself, but they're situational specific,
Yeah.
better for some situations for other than others. For example, we have many products which have large scale customer bases, and they need to be preserved into the future. They have we need stability in those products, and
Yeah.
so in those cases, right, you can see where the personality matches, and then also for things that are more on the cutting edge of our R&D. So it's team editing is probably at the onset or during the team life cycle is key, and then when it does come to distributing the gains of R&D, I perceive like I can't change people's personalities. Some of them are going to find a path through the forest just because they like exploring. But my job and the job of all the leaders under me is to compress the time between when the first person finds a path through the forest and everyone else gets through the forest. So
Yeah.
I think every time we've had a major kind of technology shift over over the time period anyway, when I've been leading, it's kind of the same 50-ish people who are really the early explorers, not because I tell them to do so, but because they want to.
Yeah.
And then cultivating that group, letting them do what they do best. Once one of them finds a superior way to get something done, or a novel way to use technology, then my job kicks in of trying to train or instruct or force everyone else through that same path as
A
fast as
really
possible.
interesting vision. I do think that also your company empowers your client's transformation, right? Because
Yes.
it's always software, it's always the basic foundation for change. How do you
Yeah.
see that
Yeah.
in your client base, having your software causing really fantastic transformation? Can you give us one example, for example?
Yeah. So we act as a conduit to diffuse technology into our customers' businesses. So the exogenous like engine for all of this is really core R&D that's done oftentimes outside of our company. I mean, this is the
Mm.
basic stuff. So most recently, if you look at things like AI, it's the rise of something like cloud computing, or it's the rise of foundation models like generative AI models. We don't do that. The cloud computing and foundation models, these are external to Trimble. But what we act is a diffusion mechanism where we take this new thing in the world, like if I take cloud computing, we take this new thing in the world, we harness it to the vision that we have for how to do something specific in the domain, like logistics procurement, logistics planning, that kind of thing. And then we package that up in a way that can be consumed by the industry, by the sector. So logistics providers, someone like maybe a less than 100-person trucking company gets access to and kind of gets powered forward by these technologies through us. And we act as that conduit to diffuse those technologies. So we've seen this happen with with cloud computing, with like kind of large scale anonymous data usage, so things like market insights. We help give people guidance on how are transportation logistics flows shifting because of tariffs, for example, or because of unrest that's happened, strikes, that kind of thing. Just real tactical, like what is strikes doing to transportation flows? Energy prices, the war in Ukraine as it's developed over the years, but also in the case of generative AI, taking real significant labor costs out of these businesses by having software do things that previously would have been the preview of humans alone.
Yeah, I think these transformation concepts need a next step software. Let's touch some other topics, because while we are talking, I'm also thinking about the remote work versus office culture we had in the past. I mean, we talked about it last time. The debate between remote and office work was once a major issue, but it's gone. It's not as long as prominent. How do you see that shift?
So, I mean, here there's a little bit of a dichotomy between how I personally see it and how Trimble as a company sees it. So I'll describe both.
Yeah.
Me personally, I prefer remote only or remote primary organizations. I think the trade-offs there, I like them. I think strategy is choosing the trade-offs you like, and the ones that I see with this is it's very difficult to hire inexperienced people with no track record into remote only organizations. You kind of need to know what you're hiring. You need to be able to look at their history and have confidence they can do the job, because you're just not going to be close to them. And the fact that they're so isolated means that you need some other mechanism to like have confidence in them. It's also challenging if they want a lot of mentoring, because remote work is more focused work. It's like less in contact with other people. But the trade-offs there is that you can get amazing talent from kind of the whole world. The whole world's your collective basin to pull talent from. And if you believe in focused work, which I do, I think the best work is not collaborations. It's actually an individual working alone to the full kind of limits of their capacities. Then it's better for that. Plus, it pushes them into the asynchronous collaboration is done through writing, and I think writing sharpens thinking. So I like that trade-off.
Nice. Now, I think the remote teams, they intersect quite better with AI tools, So when you're remotely technical, better developed. And I also think that we talked about the ecosystem a long time ago. The world is your ecosystem. On the other hand, it takes a lot of trust. How do you handle trust? Because suppose you hire me as a specialist, you only have seen me online. How do you manage trust? How do you make sure not micromanaging people digitally? What's your trick in this part?
Yeah. So I should say that I have people that I've worked with who we only worked remote over a period of time. Let's say 4 years. Only remote, but I have intense trust in them, like, center of the bone level trust. And the way that happens is a combination of writing culture. So we write to each other, and I understand kind of how they think about topics through the writing. So we don't do a bunch of video calls. I'm really opposed to that. It's really writing culture. So through their writing, I can see how they think. And then through their track record of delivery, I can trust that I can rely on them. Basically, when they say the say-do gap is very small. They say something, they do it. Now, the challenge is that neither of those is bootstrappable very easily. So when you first hire somebody, they haven't written anything usually, and they haven't done anything for you. So it takes a little while. And this is where I think the process can be tricky. That's why I tend to hire for these kind of structures. I tend to hire mid-career or later, because there's a body of work that you can inspect of somebody, hopefully, and that will give you an idea of how they think, and also that there's they can do what they say they do.
Really interesting view. Writing and track record, those are the two aspects.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And another thing that popped my mind is, we use online AI a lot. It gives us a lot of opportunities. Like writing emails, digesting these huge reports.
Yes.
I mean, I create presentations every day for my clients because I travel all over the world to do talks.
Mm-hmm.
Gamma can do the same, maybe better than I
Mm-hmm.
am. So
Mm-hmm.
this has a lot of impact on the entry and maybe low educated jobs, even the high educated jobs. They're not
Yeah.
safe. They're not safe.
Yeah.
Lawyers, accountants. So what do you see there in that space? That some jobs will be done by AI, and what does it mean for people? Entry level, mid career jobs.
Yeah. I see the current capabilities of the foundation models. So when we talk about foundation models, this is like, Grok, it's Gemini, it's OpenAI's GPT models, it's Anthropic's Claude models. These are like the frontier models that can ingest and reply back with image, videos, text, etc. These are on IQ tests. These are greater than like 95% of people. On IQ tests are a little specific. If you look at more generalized tasks, they're kind of like a 20-year-old or maybe a 22-year-old, but very diligent, very intelligent, very fast. Not super experienced in a domain, but broadly capable. And that tells me, and it's been progressing, right? And so that tells me that indeed the younger workers, the less trained workers, are the ones who are the most immediately susceptible to the capabilities of foundation models. Now, there's a little nuance here, which is, in my personal experience, less experienced workers embrace AI much faster. So if I were to look at my organization and I wiped away like the levels and I just went through the names and was like, yeah, that person really, they really use AI to get their job done. Like that person uses AI, that person uses AI. I'm mostly picking out people with less than 3 years experience. My impression is that the more experienced the people are, either because of habit or because of a sense that they can do it better themselves, they just eschew using these tools. And it's a pity. A couple of years ago, I would have said these people are going to become demigods at their jobs because they'll be so empowered. Mm-hmm. But in practice, many of them are just kind of resistant to change, to adopt the tools. And what's instead happened is that the difference between the junior and the senior worker is closed gaps much closer. Yeah.
But what I see is AI will not replace humans. People who don't use AI are now being replaced with people that use AI. We see it in global HR companies that actually also HR directors and managers. How do you look at that? I mean, you guys have a great workforce. We know that people and AI are just a better team. Quality is better, faster, more intelligent. How do you manage people not being willing to use AI in their work? How do you see that?
I mean, at a certain level, then they just have to leave. So, like, I want to not like sugarcoat the reality that just like if someone came into work and said, "I'm not really a computer person. I prefer to do it all on paper," you would entertain that for a very short period of time. Like very, very quickly, you would say, "Hey, look," or if they were like, "I'm not so sure about this internet thing," right? Like, are we sure about internet? Like, all of our data is out there on the internet. Who really controls that? You wouldn't entertain that very long. You would say, okay, like that was funny for a minute. Now you gotta get serious and use these tools. I kind of have that attitude when it comes to most of the AI tools that are deployed. Now, there's a bunch of stuff that's still in this zone of it's being proven out. I mean, we're not talking about those things. We're talking about the things that concretely we know are beneficial. Once I have conviction that something is the right way to do the job, I don't have a lot of tolerance for people who refuse to use that thing. Now, of course, there's a couple steps like on the way out. There's like a informing, training, pleading, maybe steps where at first you're like, hey, did you know there's this great new thing? And then the next step's like, hey, you know that great new thing that they told you about that you're still not using? Do you maybe need some training on that? And then the third's like, okay, man, like help me help you. Why is this not just you not doing the job that we asked you to do?
We give them
right?
the opportunity to learn and to adapt, and that's actually what you guys are doing, right? It's normal.
And very few people. I mean, my experience is like, though people may have an internal like tension where they don't really want to change, like they don't really want to have to do the extra effort. Very few people are going to take it all the way to just departure. They just need to be pushed more. Like I fundamentally disagree with a view that says you just make tools available to people and they'll adopt them by themselves. I don't think that that's reflective of human reality.
I see a lot of people being incredibly amazed and also frightening, so they're not really not about to use it, but they don't know how. And when I see that in their face, they need some education and help. That's what I see. I don't know many people who just refuse it. It's more like a little bit of angerness. They're afraid. They don't know how to do that. They don't know what it is for their job, what it means. I think that's what you just described, something important.
And fundamentally, it's the role of the leader. I think great leaders in all areas of life. This could be political leaders. This could be company leaders, or leaders in organizations like church groups or other religious groups. They provide through narrative and through vision. They provide a connection from the past to the future that feels like it makes sense of a confusing world. And I think at work, when it comes to this introduction of AI into our workplace, it's not exactly that people are just straight out refusing to engage with it. But as you said, the lack of cohesive narrative that connects the past to the future is disconcerting. And there's a human longing for like, maybe not certainty, but just like a coherent narrative that ties it all together. And that's where leaders need to step up and do their job.
It's nice. Yeah, I do think it's a lot of fun. I mean, this all belongs, in my opinion, to new leadership. The leaders that now lead should lead tomorrow. This is all part of it. I also heard that people from Google, they don't hire on diplomas. They base their judgment on the talent and what people can do. How do you do that? I mean, when you hire people, what's the value of a diploma or a degree? So how do you handle new people? What's your take on that part?
Yeah, I have zero, personally, I have zero value on diploma by itself. So, just by way of analogy, even the people who value a diploma typically don't value the courses that made up the diploma. So it's not like you ask people like, which courses did you take during your engineering degree? And then if they took one course, you value them more than if they took another course. And even if you were to have a few courses in mind, like if you're hiring people from Stanford and they took a particular course that's well known, that you may value that. But within the course, you don't ask them like, what grade did you get on this test of the course of the project? So everyone's got some level where you encapsulate and you say, look, I don't need to go into the full details. I'm going to evaluate something that's like an outcome of that. And in my case, I really don't care if you got a diploma or what your diploma's in. It should manifest itself in the quality of your thinking, which is writing, basically, the quality of your writing, and should manifest itself in what you're able to get done in a unit of time at work. So whether and maybe that's just because I come from a generation also of a lot of the people that I worked with in the beginning who were making software in the 90s, the computer science degrees were not as common or popular or useful at that time, at that explosion of internet software. It was a hacker and tinkering culture where most people were self-taught rather than academically taught. And so I look at the practicality
Really interesting.
of their,
Yeah, but what I also see is that a lot of leaders, they see that they don't get the right skills from education.
yeah,
And I see a lot of companies build their own next academy. So not the current, but the next
yeah,
academy where they teach their own people. Because in my opinion, the future is not about technology, it's about skills.
yeah,
And that means that as a company, you need to build your future skills, hire the people, hire the teachers to teach your people about tomorrow, and don't rely on education. I think it's worse. It's getting worse the next years.
yeah. It's an interest. This is a place where also the company details matter. So these companies that are large and that can reasonably assume to be in place 10 years from now
Mhm.
or 20 years from now, they think in longer time horizons. Um, I tend to think in shorter time horizons, if I'm honest. I have to stretch myself to think of these investments that will only yield their returns really in the fullness of time, like say 10 years out.
Mm.
I'm more so on this topic, for example, I instruct my hiring managers not to hire just fresh, raw people who you have to train. I go the opposite. So I don't mind hiring young people. That's not the issue. There's some incredibly talented young people. You just need to set the bar and the filter to the right level.
Mm.
And then what's interesting is I find some of the most compelling hires are people who most companies would give them less pay and a lower role simply because they're inexperienced or they're younger. But that if you were to judge them strictly on their capabilities, you you would have to acknowledge that, hey, they're already essentially a senior. It's just that they're 23 years old, 22 years old, and that's the kind of people I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But this brings me to the last topic. It's a spot on topic because the thing is, we talked about managing uncertainty. It's a big challenge. And my
yeah,
opinion is we can't do it alone. So alongside the older generation, we need fresh young minds.
yes,
And we call this reverse mentoring, where the young
yeah,
person teaches the older person, and likewise, both, they teach them both. And I believe that young people have amazing skills, but leaders should, you know, delegate a part of the leading to those young people instead of shout louder. More like the leader who listens and who's willing to say, I don't know this, but can you help me out? So what is your
yeah.
take on this reverse mentoring concept?
We actually use reverse mentoring.
Oh, wow.
Ironically, we use it, but we use it mostly for taking uh, frontier skill sets up to executives. So, like a case in point here is our CEO Rob Painter is getting mentoring from a couple really great younger individual contributors on topics around AI, around generative AI. So essentially, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take fast changing frontier expertise, which someone just by the nature of their work and their life, there's no way their experience could have included this. It's brand new, right?
And
Yeah,
that's cool. So he's and what about you? I mean, you're quite an
I have the same.
experienced guy.
Yeah,
You the same? Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead. Yeah.
yeah. I have the same thing, and I think I read a lot of biographies. That's one of the ways that I try to spend my time learning is read a lot of biographies. And I noticed that a common pattern for a certain kind of leader is that they would cultivate, they would sort of always be in radar mode for emerging talent. And then they would cultivate these mentoring relationships with those emerging talents. And if you sort of really inspect it, what's going on there is it's not reverse mentoring or mentoring. It's kind of a two-way street. So
It is. Yeah.
the younger person's getting access to a powerful sponsor who can help them accelerate their career and also give them maybe tips. So like sponsor is then I talk about you to other people, not like give you tips, but just like elevate you. and give you access to my network and my resources. And then the reverse is kind of, this is how that person avoids being insulated. So I'll give you an example. In my role, if I say something in my town hall or all hands, if I say, I think we should go this direction, even well-meaningly, my organization will insulate and mirror back to me positive feedback on that topic. Like, basically, I will get a lot of, yeah, that's a great idea. We should do that. What I need to be able to do is penetrate through that kind of initial wall and get a sensory network to like reality.
Yeah.
And one of the best ways to do that is to find emerging talent, usually earlier in their career, emerging talent
but
who I can have.
It needs different leadership, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it needs a listening leader, a leader who's able to be vulnerable. Because if you as a leader have negative comments on one of your decisions or about to make decisions, that is a different leadership, right?
Yeah. You need to. It's a leadership style that values getting information about reality rather than just confirming itself, so to speak, or executing its own vision.
It's a really inspiring conversation, Jonah, today. I would like to talk to you for hours about this topic, but we got to go slowly to the end. I really want to thank you for your advice and all your insights. I think the listeners and people who watched the video, they heard a lot of interesting examples. I'd like to end with a piece of advice you'd like to share to the listeners and the viewers of the podcast. 1 or 2 ideas. Would you please share them with us? Can't wait to hear them.
I mean, maybe the main thing that comes to mind is just to have an incredibly high bar of excellence for yourself and for other people. I know, at least for me, I have a quite critical internal world. Like my life of my mind is constantly self-critical, and sometimes that becomes critical of other people. But it does have a positive impact in terms of I'm always asking myself, like, is this the best that I could have done? It's not the best in the world. Like, I can't hold myself to that standard, but I can hold myself to a standard of, was this the best that I could do, truly? And I think that there's something to be gained out of that, especially as relates to connecting the work that you do to some sort of a higher purpose. I do believe that for almost everybody who's going to be listening to this podcast, they shouldn't be thinking of their life as just trading hours of a limited life for somebody else's money. They have an impact on the world. They have the potential to have an impact on the world. And given that they can impact other people in the world, holding themselves to a higher bar than they might otherwise do so is always good advice.
That's a really inspiring advice. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for doing this podcast. Thank you so much. Also, the people, thank you all for listening. And we'll be back with another podcast really soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
bye, Jonah.
Bye-bye.